sinking deep in sin, far from the peaceful shore, very deeply stained within, sinking to rise no more. But the master of the sea heard my despairing cry, from the waters lifted me, now saved am I. Love lifted me, love lifted.
What about this word love we hear so much about? Does this love cost? And is it worth the time and attention given to it? Let me begin this morning with a story that I saw on Wikimedia, published November the 4th, 2018, and updated January the 17th, 2020. A story of a man called Easy or Artful Eddie. They say that he lacked nothing. He was the slickest of slick lawyers. He was a crony of Al Capone. He ran the gangsters' dark tracks. They say that he mastered the simple technique of fixing the race by overfeeding 7 dogs and betting on the 8th. Wealth, he had it. Status, he had it. Style, he had it all. But one day he turned himself in. He squealed on Capone. What was his motive? He knew the consequences, but he made up his mind. Why? His son. Eddie has spent his life with the despicable. He smelled the stench of the underground long enough, but he wanted more for his son. He wanted to give his son a name. He wanted to clear his name. He was willing to take a risk so that his son could have a clean slate. But he never saw his dream come true, because when he squealed on the mob, they remembered. They say that 2 shotgun blasts silenced him forever. And the question still is, was it worth it? For the son, it was. He lived up to the sacrifices. He is one of the best known names in the world. Have you heard about O'Hare International Airport? That's the name, O'Hare. Before we talk more about this son, let's talk about the principle. The principle of risky, extravagant, chance-taking love, a special kind of love. We'll have to go to Matthew chapter 26 and Mark chapter 14 to get the story, because we're talking about love that takes a chance, love that goes out on a limb, love that makes a statement and leaves a legacy. We are talking about sacrificial love. Love which is unexpected. Love which is surprising and stirring. Acts of love that steal the heart and leave impression on the soul. Acts of love which are never forgotten. Such an act of love was seen in the last week of the life of Jesus as we look at Matthew 26. A demonstration of devotion that the world will never forget. An act of extravagant tenderness in which Jesus was not the giver, but he was the receiver. So let's go on a journey in Matthew 26. Friends encircled Jesus at a table in the city of Bethany, at the house of one called Simon. Simon was known as the leper, But he was no longer a leper. He was just Simon. You see, leprosy stooped the shoulders and left a person with fingerless hands, scabbed arm, and infected back, draped in rags. Old shabby wrap which hides the face except for two screaming white eyes. He had been quarantined. That was before Jesus touched him. That was before Jesus came into contact with him. A man who was a leprous man is now free because he came into contact with Jesus. Now this man invited Jesus over for dinner. I want us to see all this is before Christ will go to Pilate and others. A simple act, but it must have meant a lot to Jesus. After all, the Pharisees had already been cleaning him a cell on death row. But Simon invited Jesus over to dinner. Didn't he know that this was trouble? Didn't he know that he was going against the leaders of the day? He was prepared to risk all for Jesus. That's the kind of risky love we're talking about today. We all are aware of the fact of what God has done for us and what he is doing for us. We love that. But what about us and our response to God? Do we do this kind of love? When Jesus was in Simon's house, remember, it won't be very long until Lazarus come into the picture. Could it be that the whole lot of them will be on a wanted poster by the end of the week? It takes nerves to have a wanted man in your home. And Simon had Jesus. Simon didn't forget what Jesus had done. He couldn't forget. Where there had been ulcerous souls, there was now skin for his wife to stroke. Where there had been lonely hours in quarantine, there was now happy hours such as this. A house full of friends, a table full of food. Where am I going to go from here but to say thank you, Jesus, and to make the sacrifice necessary to show how thankful I am? Simon didn't forget. He knew what it was like to stare death in the face. He knew what it was like to have no home to call your home, and he knew what it was like to be misunderstood. He wanted Jesus to know that if he ever needed a meal and a place to lay his head, there was one house in Bethany to which he could go. Oh, other houses will be as gracious as Simon's. Before the week is up, Jesus will spend time in the high priest's house. For that matter, the nicest house in Jerusalem. 3 barns in the back and a beautiful view of the valley. My friends, when we think of Jesus and Simon, as Jesus comes into the high priest's house, he won't see the view. He would only see the false witnesses. He would hear the lies. He would feel the slap in his face. Do you think you're having a hard time? Think about Jesus. Before the week is up, Jesus will visit the chambers of Herod, elegant chambers, plenty of servants. Perhaps there's food and wine on the table. But Herod won't offer any to Jesus. Herod wanted tricks. He wanted a sideshow. Show me a miracle, country boy, he would say. He will jab. The guards will snicker. before the week is up, Jesus will visit the home of Pilate, a rare opportunity to stand before the couch of the procurator of Israel. Should be an honor. Should be a moment to remember, but it won't be. In a moment, the world would rather forget. Pilate had an opportunity to perform the world's greatest act of mercy, and he doesn't. God is in the house, and Pilate doesn't see him. What if Pilate had come to the defense of the innocent? What if the high priest had been as concerned with truth as he was with position? What if one of them had turned their back on the crowd and their face toward Christ and make a stand? But they didn't. The mountain of prestige was too high. The fall would have been too great. But Simon did. Risky love seizes the moment. Simon took a chance. He gave Jesus a good meal. Not much more, or not much, but more than most. And when the priest accused and the soldier slapped, perhaps Jesus remembered what Simon did and was strengthened. And when he remembered Simon's meal, perhaps he remembered what comes next, Mary's gesture. Maybe he would even smell the perfume. While he is in Simon's house, here comes this woman behind him. She was not invited. But here comes a woman who is not invited to give to Jesus something that Jesus didn't ask for. But she was willing to risk her love for Jesus. Love that is real love comes with a risk. No one knows the future. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or the next day or the next day. But there is a risk involved. Are you prepared to take that risk? You give birth to a child. He grows up with you laughing and talking and having a good time. Then one day he grows up and he makes his own decision. And then you have to say, you're taking a risk. Are you prepared to go all the way in this risk? Let's see something about this woman called Mary in our text. She comes up behind Jesus, and all she had was this expensive bottle of perfume. Maybe Jesus could smell the perfume. 12 ounces imported, concentrated, sweet, strong enough as scent to be in a man's clothes for days. It wasn't an act of impulse. She carried the large vial of perfume from her house to Simon's house. It wasn't a spontaneous gesture. It was an extravagant one. The perfume was worth a year's wages. And that was over $16,000. Maybe the only thing of value she had, it was not a logical thing to do. But when has love, or since when has love been led by logic? You can make all the premises you want to, and you can draw a conclusion, but you ain't talking about love. Because what is today might not be tomorrow. See, logic hadn't touched Simon. It wasn't logic that made him invite Jesus to his house. It was love. Common sense hadn't wept at Lazarus' tomb. Practicality didn't feed the crowds or love the children. Love did. Extravagant, risky, chance-taking love. And now someone needs to show the same to the giver of such love. So Mary did. She stepped up behind him, stood with the jar in her hand. She broke the box of ointment and poured it on the head of Jesus. The ointment was valued, as we said, with 300 pence. A pence was the daily wage of the average worker. Therefore, in modern terms, it was worth about 15,000 bucks. This spikenard was produced from a rare plant that grew in India. It was very expensive, and many people saved for years to be able to provide this for their own funeral. However, this woman didn't know Jesus was going to die. She poured it out on the head of Jesus. Just imagine this morning that she is in the room and you are there as a witness. You are in Simon's house. You remember that Simon used to be a nobody. But Jesus got to him. And now he is somebody, and he's proven he is somebody by loving Jesus in a time when love was not easy, because the whole world was at Jesus trying to nail him on a cross. So here we have Mary. We got to think of two ancient customs that are here in this lesson. The first had to do with the breaking of glasses. When a distinguished person ate in a home, often the glass they had used was broken to prevent a lesser person from using it in the future. Another custom had to do with burial rituals. After the body of the deceased had been washed and anointed, the box that had contained the emblem spices was broken and the fragments buried with him. Perhaps these were in Mary's mind, I don't know. However, I like to imagine that she broke the vessel so that she might extract every drop of ointment for use on the Lord Jesus. Regardless of the reason, one thing is clear. Mary gave all she had to Jesus for his glory. The disciples saw it. They didn't like it. They even said, "What is this woman doing? This thing could have been sold for a lot of money and do a lot of good." And Jesus rebuked them and he said, "She has done what she could." Yes. That's what love does. It goes beyond. Listen, when we think of these folks, or rather, I wonder, have we broken the alabaster box of our life and poured out ourselves? Every drop for Jesus? This is the thought that occupied the mind of Paul as he faced his own death. I can hear him say, "For I am ready to be offered. The time of my departure is at hand. I have fought a good fight. I have finished my course. I have kept the faith." The bowl is being broken. We should look at our lives and ask ourselves if we have given everything we have and are to Jesus. You see, Mary's sacrifice was the ultimate expression of her love and worship of Jesus Christ. She gave all she had. Have we placed everything we are on the altar for him? Think about it seriously. What have you given to him, and what have you held back for yourself and for another? Within a couple of moments, every mouth was silent, every eye wide as they watched her nervous fingers remove the awning cover. Only Jesus was not aware of her presence. Everyone else was. Just as she noticed everyone was looking behind him, she began to pour over his head, over his shoulders, down his back. She would have poured herself out for him if she could. The fragrance, the sweetness rushed through the room. Smells of cooked ham and herbs were lost in the aroma of the sweet ointment. This is the aroma that makes you remember the one who cares. Sometimes in life, we all have to make some very difficult decisions. Sometimes in life, our mates, our spouses may come to the time when they need someone to take care of them. And we have to make some decisions whether or not we are able physically and what is the best course to take. And only risky love will make the difference. No one else will understand whether or not I have to let my person go to a home or I have to take care of this person myself. No one else could understand that but you. And you are risking everything to make the best decision. Not just for you, but for your wife or your husband or your child. Do you think it is easy for a mother or father to take a child who is now 50, 60 years old back at home when the child has gotten sick? Do you think it is easy for a person who's been accustomed to work 8 hours a day or more to say, I have to retire to take care of my wife or my husband? Risky love.
Yes.
It takes a lot of love. I'm risking my own retirement. I'm risking something in order to take care of someone else. Mary was risking something. Simon risked his life for Jesus. What are you risking for Jesus? In a day of selfishness, when it's all about me, it's time to say, it's about me to make a decision for someone else, not just for me. And then God says, when I do this and I pray to God, my prayer will go up as a sweet aroma before God. Incense will be our prayers, be like our prayers. And remember what we said, it takes some courage. The disciples mocked her extravagance. They thought it was foolish. Man, do you mean that you have to give up your life? Yes! That's what love does. That's what risky love does. And I'm giving up my life not expecting anything better, but doing what I know that I should. Jesus had saved them, they remember, from a sinking boat in a stormy sea. He'd enabled them to heal and to preach. He brought focus into their fuzzy lives. They're the recipients of exorbitant love. Chastise this woman's generosity. Why waste the perfume? It could have been sold for such a great deal of money and given to the poor. They didn't care about the poor. They just cared about themselves. Why are you troubling this woman? Jesus said, she has done an excellent thing for me. His message is just as powerful today as it was then. Don't miss it. There is a time for risky love. There is a time for extravagant gestures. There is a time to pour your affections on one you love, not necessarily on one who loves you, but one you love. And when the time comes, seize it. Don't miss it. Risky love. Do you have it? What has Jesus done for you? He has done everything for us. What are we prepared to do for him? I was sinking deep in sin, far from the peaceful shore. Think of what Jesus did for us. I was like a drowning person out there in the ocean with no one to rescue me. But Jesus came and rescued me from the waters that were around me. You're here this morning, and we're asking you, are you prepared to risk your love for Jesus? Whatever is going on in your life, stop a moment. It might be complete opposite to what Jesus Christ needs from you, but Jesus, loving Jesus, is worth the risk. It's worth it. I'm glad my wife loves Jesus. I'm glad she loves Jesus, or she would be with me. Oh, not that I'm so bad a person, but seriously, stop for a moment and think what Jesus has given for you, and ask yourself the question, am I willing to risk my love for him by doing what he wants me to do, by being what he wants me to be, by living how he wants me to live, by acknowledging who he is? I like the Psalms, Brother Pastor. Oh God, thou hast been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever thou hast formed the earth and the world, even from everlasting to everlasting, thou art God. That's enough for me to say, I'm willing to risk insult. I'm willing to risk being defamed. I'm willing to risk anything for my Jesus. Are you? Come to him this morning, believing in him, repenting of your sins, confessing his name before this audience, and be buried with him in baptism, and you'll arise to walk in the newness of life. And you will begin to imagine, not only to imagine, but to experience what it is like to risk love for Jesus. Being laughed at, being ridiculed, being said that you think that you're better than somebody else. Yes, Jesus makes a difference in our lives. Come to him this morning as together we stand and sing.
When we walk with the Lord in the light of his word, what a glory he sheds on our way. While we do his good will, he abides with us still, and with all who will trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no